Imagine moving into a beautiful old house. The floors creak with history. The walls breathe with stories of the past. First, it feels charming, like living inside a piece of history. But then, strange things begin to happen. A shadow flickers in a hallway where no one stands. Footsteps echo upstairs when the family is asleep downstairs. Lights flicker, doors slam, and suddenly, that dream home begins to feel like a nightmare. Haunted houses aren't just campfire tales or Hollywood horror scripts. They are real places where ordinary people swear they've encountered the extraordinary. Some of these homes hide tragic pasts. Others conceal secrets buried deep within their walls. But one thing is certain. Once you hear their stories, you'll never look at your own home the same way again. So, turn off the lights, lean in close, and prepare yourself for a journey through some of the most chilling real-life haunted house stories ever told. Before we dive into the shadows, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the spine-tingling stories we uncover every week. If you love exploring mysteries and tales that keep you on edge, give this video a like and share it with a friend who dares to watch. Now, let's open the door and step into the darkness together. Chapter 1: The House That Shouldn't Exist. On the outskirts of a quiet town stood a house that defied reason. From a distance, it looked ordinary. 2 stories, slanted roof, a garden overrun with weeds. But the closer you got, the more the details stopped making sense. Windows that looked different from the outside than they did inside. Staircases that ended abruptly against solid walls. Doors that opened into nothing. Local builders swore no architect designed it, and the blueprints, if they ever existed, had long vanished. Neighbors said the house had been standing longer than anyone alive could remember. And yet, strangely, there were no records of when it was built. The few families brave enough to move in didn't last long. They reported feelings of disorientation, like the rooms themselves shifted when no one was looking. One family claimed that a hallway they walked through every day simply disappeared overnight. Another swore they heard muffled conversations coming from inside the walls, even though no one was there. What made it worse was the atmosphere. Guests described it as a pressure in the chest, like the house was aware of their presence, and didn't want them there. By the time the last residents left, the legend was sealed. This was a house that shouldn't exist, and the mystery of how it stood, and why it repelled anyone who entered, remains unsolved to this day. Chapter 2: Whispers in the Attic. It always started at night, long after the lights went out. When the town had settled into silence, faint whispers drifted down from the attic. At first, the family thought it was just the house settling, wood expanding and contracting with the weather. But then the whispers grew louder, clearer, distinct enough that you could almost make out words. Neighbors who stayed overheard it too. Some swore it was a man's voice, deep and deliberate. Others claimed it sounded like several people whispering all at once, like a crowded room trying to keep secrets. The strangest detail? No 2 people ever described the same words. One teenage daughter left her recorder running overnight. The next morning, she played it back for her family. What they heard sent shivers through the room. A breathy voice repeating her name over and over, until it trailed off into static. Curious, the family finally searched the attic. They found nothing unusual, just old insulation, beams, and dust. But the whispers continued, almost as if the attic itself was speaking. Eventually, the family abandoned the house. Later owners reported the same phenomenon, and paranormal investigators confirmed that the sounds weren't caused by rodents, plumbing, or wind. The attic remains silent in daylight, but when darkness falls, it remembers and whispers again. Chapter 3: The Family That Wouldn't Leave. When the Johnson family bought their dream home, they thought they were stepping into a fresh start. The house was old but beautiful, large windows, polished wood floors, and a fireplace that begged for cozy winter nights. But what they didn't know was that another family had already laid claim to the space, and they weren't alive. It began with small things. A rocking chair swaying on its own in the corner. Family photos that were moved, flipped face down, or sometimes even vanished entirely. Then came the sounds, footsteps echoing through the hallways, the clinking of silverware in the kitchen, as if someone was preparing a meal just out of sight. One evening, the youngest child whispered to her parents that she'd made a new friend upstairs. When asked who, she replied, "The lady in the old dress who tucks me in." Terrified, her parents checked her room, only to find it empty. Yet the sheets were neatly pulled up, just as their daughter described. The Johnsons weren't the only ones. Every family that moved into the house reported the same, the lingering presence of its original residents. Some say they died tragically inside. Others believe they simply refused to move on. To this day, the house is whispered about as a place where death doesn't mean goodbye. Chapter 4: Footsteps on the Staircase. There's something uniquely unsettling about footsteps. The rhythm, the weight, the sense that someone is coming closer. For one family, that sound became a nightly terror. Every night, just past midnight, the old staircase groaned under invisible weight. First a single step, then another, slowly, deliberately, as though someone was making their way upward. The family tried to dismiss it at first. Old wood, shifting beams, perhaps even the house settling. But when they pressed their ears against the wall, the sound was undeniable. These weren't random creaks. These were footsteps. Paranormal investigators were called in, setting up cameras and audio recorders. Sure enough, at exactly 12:07 a.m., the equipment captured it. Heavy steps climbing, one by one, until they reached the landing. But the cameras? They showed nothing. No movement. No shadow. Just an empty staircase echoing with the sound of someone who wasn't there. Neighbors claimed the haunting dated back to the house's first owner, a man who died suddenly before finishing renovations. Some believe his spirit climbs the stairs each night, still trying to reach a room he never lived in. Whatever the cause, the family eventually blocked off the staircase altogether. But even with doors nailed shut, the footsteps never stopped. Each night, the house remembers. And each night, something unseen climbs higher. Chapter 5: The Mirror That Watches Back. Mirrors have always carried a strange kind of weight. They reflect us, but sometimes it feels like they're seeing more than just our faces. For one family, an antique mirror became the centerpiece of their most terrifying experiences. It was a beautiful, ornate piece passed down through generations, its frame carved with twisting patterns that almost looked alive. At first, it was admired as a family heirloom. But soon, odd details began to surface. Visitors reported seeing movement in the glass that didn't match the room behind them. A hand, a figure, sometimes even a face, lingering just for a second before vanishing. The family brushed it off as imagination, until one night, the eldest son swore the reflection smiled back at him, even though his own lips hadn't moved. From then on, the atmosphere shifted. The mirror grew colder to the touch. Lights flickered when anyone stood in front of it. And those who dared to stare too long often felt dizzy, as if the glass were pulling them in. Paranormal researchers later suggested that objects, especially mirrors, can hold energy from traumatic pasts. Was this mirror merely reflecting reality, or revealing something that wasn't meant to be seen? Eventually, the family locked it away in the attic. But even now, anyone who passes too close swears they feel it watching. Waiting. Chapter 6: Vanishing Children's Laughter. There's something unsettling about hearing laughter when no one is there to make it. For one small town, this became an all-too-familiar occurrence. It started in a quiet cul-de-sac where families often gathered outside. Parents reported hearing faint giggles after sunset. Light, playful, unmistakably the sound of children. At first, they assumed neighborhood kids were sneaking around, playing hide and seek long past bedtime. But when they went outside to check, the streets were empty. Soon, the laughter spread. People walking their dogs late at night heard it echoing from alleyways. Joggers claimed it followed them, bouncing between houses, always just out of sight. Some described it as cheerful, others as hollow, almost mocking. One night, a father swore he saw shadows darting across his yard, small and childlike. But when he shone a flashlight, there was nothing there. His young daughter later admitted she often heard voices calling her name in the dark. Voices that sounded like other children, urging her to come play. Historians unearthed a disturbing connection. Decades earlier, A fire had destroyed an orphanage on the edge of town. Many children perished, their laughter silenced forever. Locals now believe those echoes remain, drifting through the night as a reminder of lives cut short. To this day, the laughter comes and goes. Always faint, always fleeting, and always when no real children are near. Chapter 7: The Phantom Hitchhiker's Return. Highways can be lonely places at night. Long stretches of road lit only by dim headlights and the occasional flicker of a street lamp. That's when drivers say they've encountered her. She's often described the same way. A young woman, pale, standing at the roadside in a simple white dress. Her hair hangs long, sometimes wet, and she looks desperate for a ride. Out of pity, or fear of leaving her alone, drivers often stop. She climbs in, quietly thanking them with a voice barely above a whisper. The ride usually starts normal. She gives vague directions, asking to be taken home. But halfway through, she vanishes. No sound, no movement, just gone. The car seat is empty, yet the air still feels heavy, as though someone invisible lingers. Curious locals once traced the stories back to an old accident. Decades earlier, a young woman had been killed in a car crash on that very highway, her body thrown onto the roadside. Many believe she still waits for a ride home she never reached. The most unsettling reports come from drivers who do make it to the house she names. They knock on the door, only to be greeted by an elderly couple. When told they just dropped off their daughter, the couple weeps, because their daughter has been dead for over 50 years. And so the phantom hitchhiker keeps returning, again and again, her tragic journey unfinished, her presence forever haunting the road. Chapter 8: The Room That Never Sleeps. Some places feel alive, even when empty. One hotel on the outskirts of town learned this the hard way, with a room so disturbing that staff eventually sealed it shut. Guests who stayed in room 27 reported the same thing. They could never truly sleep. No matter how tired they were, their bodies refused to rest. Some lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, their eyes wide, hearts racing. Others drifted off briefly, only to wake moments later to the sound of whispers near their bed. One businessman described it as if the walls themselves were breathing, pulsing in and out, keeping him awake with a suffocating rhythm. Another swore he saw a shadow crouched in the corner, vanishing the second he turned on the light. Cleaning staff complained of headaches and nosebleeds after spending too much time inside. Even the air felt heavy, charged with unseen energy. Eventually, a historian uncovered a possible reason. Decades before, the hotel was built on the remains of a boarding house where a deranged owner had kept tenants locked in their rooms, depriving them of food, light, and, most cruelly, sleep. Many died delirious, their minds collapsing long before their bodies gave out. Locals believe their unrest lingers, infecting anyone who enters room 27 with their eternal insomnia. To this day, the door remains boarded up, because sleep is a luxury that room will never allow. Chapter 9: The Man in the Mirror. Mirrors have always been portals of superstition. Some say they reflect more than just your face. And one family in New Orleans became convinced of it. It started innocently. Their teenage daughter complained about a strange reflection in the old hallway mirror. A man in a dark coat, standing behind her. Her parents brushed it off as imagination, until they began catching glimpses themselves. The man never moved, never blinked, just watched. What made it worse was his absence from reality. Whenever they turned, the hallway was empty. Yet in the mirror he remained, closer each time. The family covered the mirror with a sheet, hoping to block him out. But at night, they heard scratching sounds coming from beneath the fabric. One morning, the sheet had fallen to the floor, the mirror cracked down the center, as if something had pushed from the inside. Terrified, they invited a priest to bless the home. While praying, he paused and turned pale. When asked why, he whispered, "He's standing right behind us." The mirror now sits in a locked storage unit, never displayed again. But the family admits they still dream of him. His dark coat, his unblinking stare. Like he's waiting for the day they'll look into another mirror and find him there. Chapter 10: Whispers of the Abandoned Asylum. On the edge of a small Midwestern town sits an abandoned asylum, its windows shattered, its walls streaked with mold and ivy. For years, thrill seekers and ghost hunters have ventured inside, and almost all of them report the same thing. The whispers. They begin faintly, like the rustling of leaves, but soon they form words. Pleas for help, cries of pain, fragments of conversations that shouldn't exist anymore. Some explorers swear the voices follow them, circling closer, until they feel icy breath at the back of their necks. The asylum's history explains the unrest. Built in the late 1800s, it was notorious for overcrowding and cruel treatments. Patients were restrained for days, subjected to electroshock therapy, and in some cases, left to waste away in locked rooms. Many never left those walls alive. One urban explorer recorded audio inside, capturing what sounded like a chorus of voices chanting, "Stay with us." Another claimed he was shoved down a staircase by unseen hands. Locals warn never to answer the whispers. A former night watchman once shouted back in anger, only to find deep scratches carved across his car the next morning, as if something had followed him home. The asylum still stands, silent from the outside, but inside, the air is thick with secrets. Those who dare enter say it's not a question of if you'll hear the whispers. It's a question of whether you'll make it out before they decide you belong there, too. Chapter 11, The Shadow on the Stairs. There's an old Victorian house in Massachusetts with a staircase no one dares to use after dark. At first glance, it looks ordinary. Creaky with steps, a banister worn smooth by time. But those who climb it often speak of the shadow. It doesn't appear all at once. At first, it's just a darker patch of darkness, clinging to the steps ahead. Then it stretches, growing taller until it takes the shape of a person. Faceless, featureless, but undeniably watching. Homeowners over the years reported the same chilling experience. As they climbed, the shadow climbed with them, always one step ahead. When they stopped, it stopped. When they hurried, it hurried. But if anyone ever tried to touch it, the shadow would vanish, only to reappear at the very top, waiting. Some believe it's the ghost of the house's first owner, a stern man known for punishing his children by locking them in the attic. Others think it's something older, something that's always lived there, feeding off fear and footsteps. One visitor swore she felt a hand press against her chest, stopping her halfway up. Another said the banister burned hot beneath his palm, as though warning him to turn back. To this day, guests avoid the staircase at night. They'd rather sleep downstairs than risk finding out what happens when the shadow finally lets someone reach the top. Chapter 12, The Phantom Hitchhiker. Highways can feel endless at night, the white lines blurring under tired eyes. But for drivers along a lonely stretch of Route 66, the journey turns chilling when they encounter her, the Phantom Hitchhiker. She appears suddenly on the roadside, a young woman in a pale dress, her hair tangled, her eyes wide with desperation. Drivers who stop say she climbs in silently, whispering only one request, "Take me home." She gives an address nearby, and for a while the ride feels normal until they glance back and realize the seat is empty.
When curious drivers visit the address she gave, they're met with an unsettling truth. The family at the house explains their daughter died tragically years ago on that very stretch of road, trying to walk home after a crash. They've heard the story countless times from strangers who thought they were helping her. Some report more terrifying encounters. One trucker swore she didn't vanish quietly. She screamed, a sound so piercing it nearly drove him off the road. Another claimed she left behind muddy footprints on his passenger seat. Legends of phantom hitchhikers exist worldwide, but this one remains the most enduring. Perhaps it's because her story strikes at a simple fear. Picking up someone who isn't really there, and realizing too late you're not alone on that long, dark drive. Chapter 13, The Possessed Doll. In a quiet Florida suburb, a porcelain doll sits locked in a glass case, never touched, never played with, and for good reason. Locals whisper it isn't a toy at all, but a vessel. The doll once belonged to a little girl in the 1930s. Her parents notice strange things almost immediately. They find the doll in different positions than where it was left. Sometimes it was standing upright on its own. Sometimes its head had turned completely around. At night, the girl would wake up screaming, claiming the doll whispered her name. Neighbors grew uneasy when they heard the same whispers through the walls. A visiting aunt swore she saw the doll blink. And then came the night the girl nearly suffocated. Her parents found the doll lying on her chest, its tiny hands pressed against her throat. Terrified, the family handed the doll to a local priest who attempted an exorcism. But instead of cleansing it, the ceremony only made the activity worse. Lights flickered, objects flew across the room, and the doll's glass eyes seemed to follow everyone present. Eventually, it was locked away in a protective case and later placed in a small museum of haunted artifacts. To this day, visitors report hearing tapping on the glass or seeing the doll's lips twitch into a faint smile. And no one dares to call its name out loud, because some say if the doll hears you, it'll follow you home. Chapter 14, The Woman in White. All across the world, stories of a woman in white linger like a shadow in folklore. But one particular legend from a riverside town in Texas has terrified generations. Locals say she appears on foggy nights, standing near the riverbank, her dress flowing and her long hair dripping wet. At first glance, she looks like someone in distress, pale, fragile, silently weeping. Drivers passing by often slow down, feeling an urge to help. But those who step closer always regret it. Witnesses claim her face is blurred, as though water distorts her features. And when she lifts her head, her sorrow turns to rage. One man swore she let out a wail, so piercing it left him deaf in one ear. Another said she tried to pull him into the water, her grip like ice, her eyes glowing with fury. The legend ties back to tragedy. More than a century ago, a young woman lost her children in the river during a flood. Unable to live with the grief, she wandered the banks in her wedding dress until she, too, drowned. Locals believe her spirit still searches for her lost children, mistaking strangers for them and dragging them into the same watery grave. To this day, people avoid the river at night, and when fog rolls in, some swear they hear faint sobbing carried by the wind, a warning that the woman in white is near. Chapter 15, The Disappearing Village. Travelers in the Scottish Highlands tell a chilling story about a village that no map records anymore. They say if you wander far enough into the misty hills, you might stumble upon it. A cluster of stone cottages, smoke rising from chimneys, and villagers dressed in clothes from another century. At first, it feels almost magical. The people smile politely, invite you to share bread or warm by their fire. But something always feels off. Their eyes don't blink as often as they should. Their laughter is hollow, as if rehearsed. And the silence that follows each word is heavier than the air itself. One hiker swore he spent hours in the village, only to find when he stepped back onto the trail, his watch had lost an entire day. Another claimed he took a photograph, but when developed, the image showed only empty hills where the cottages should have been. Historians speculate the legend ties back to an actual settlement wiped out by plague in the 1700s. Cut off from help, the villagers perished together, their bodies buried in mass graves. Some say the land itself remembers, replaying their final days in an endless loop for those unlucky enough to wander in. Locals give one warning. If you find yourself in that village, never accept food or drink, because those who do are said to vanish, becoming part of the ghostly population never seen again. Chapter 16, The Vanishing Hitchhiker's Twin. Everyone's heard tales of the phantom hitchhiker, but along a quiet stretch of highway in Arizona, there's a more sinister twist, because here, there are two. Drivers often report seeing identical twin girls standing side by side on the shoulder of the road, their pale dresses glowing faintly under the headlights. They never wave, never speak, just stare. Some drivers, feeling uneasy, keep going. Others slow down, thinking they're in danger. That's when the terror begins. Those who pick them up say the twins climb silently into the back seat. For miles, they remain still, their faces expressionless. Then, just as the driver begins to relax, the girls whisper in unison, "He's coming." Before the driver can respond, they vanish, leaving the car ice cold. One trucker swore he saw a shadowy figure chasing his rig in the rearview mirror after the twins disappeared. Another driver claimed claw marks appeared on his windows, as though something had tried to get inside. Folklore ties the legend to a tragic crash decades ago, when two sisters were killed walking home from a school dance. But some believe the twins aren't simply spirits of the past. They're messengers, warning of something darker that haunts the lonely desert roads. To this day, drivers avoid stopping if they see two figures together at night. Because if the twins appear, it's never just a ride. They're only the beginning of the nightmare. Chapter 17, The Haunted Painting. Art has the power to move people, but some works of art seem to do more than that. One painting, known among collectors as the Weeping Boy, has a reputation so dark that many refuse to even keep a copy of it. At first glance, it's nothing unusual. A young boy, painted with hauntingly sad eyes, tears rolling down his cheeks. But those who've owned it tell the same terrifying story. The painting never stays where it's hung. Owners find it tilted or move to another wall entirely. Some claim the boy's tears seem to glisten more at night, as if they're freshly painted. Others insist his eyes follow them across the room. In the 1980s, rumors spread in England that houses displaying the painting mysteriously burned down, yet the painting always survived, untouched by flames. Firefighters began to whisper that it carried a curse. Soon, terrified owners started destroying or discarding their copies, only to find them reappearing in their homes days later. Skeptics dismiss the stories as urban legend, but believers warn that the boy in the painting is more than paint and canvas. Some say he was based on an orphan who died tragically, his spirit bound forever to the artwork. Today, the original remains locked away in a private collection. But even now, replicas circulate online, and those who dare to hang one on their wall often report the same thing: soft sobbing in the middle of the night, coming from the frame itself. Chapter 18, The Poltergeist of Room. In a crumbling motel off a forgotten highway, travelers whisper about a room that seems alive with fury. Room 6. Guests who check in often don't last the night. It starts small, a light flickering, a knock at the wall. Then things escalate. Bibles are flung across the room. Drawers slam open and shut. Luggage is overturned as if something is searching through it. Guests describe an overwhelming feeling of being unwelcome, like the air itself is pressing them toward the door. One couple claimed their mattress lifted several inches off the bed frame before crashing down violently. Another said their child was pinned against the wall by invisible hands, screaming until they fled. The motel's owner admits he avoids the room completely. Years ago, a drifter died there under strange circumstances. Some say he was murdered, others believe he took his own life, but whatever happened, his rage seems to have soaked into the walls. A paranormal team once stayed overnight, capturing chilling evidence. Their cameras caught chairs sliding across the floor on their own, and an audio recorder picked up a guttural voice repeating, "Get out." After that, the owner stopped renting room 6 entirely. Today it stands locked, curtains drawn, the door scarred with scratches no one can explain. Travelers pass the motel every night, unaware that behind one door waits a spirit that doesn't just haunt, it attacks. Chapter 19, The Crying Child of the Bridge. There's an old wooden bridge on the outskirts of a rural town in Tennessee, where locals warn you never to stop in the middle at night. If you do, you might hear it, the sound of a child crying. At first, it's faint, like a whimper carried on the wind. But as you stand still, the crying grows louder, closer, until it's right beside you, though no child is there. Drivers who've stopped report feeling their car shake, as if small hands were pushing against it. Some even swear they've seen tiny wet footprints appear across the hood. The legend traces back to the 1800s, when a family's wagon overturned on the bridge, plunging into the river below. The parents drowned, but townsfolk say the youngest child was heard screaming for hours before the waters took him too. Since then, his spirit is said to linger, forever calling out for help. Teenagers daring each other often test the legend. Many say if you stop and turn off your engine, You'll hear knocking on the car doors, followed by the unmistakable sound of sobbing. A few claim they've driven away only to find muddy handprints smeared across their windows. For locals, the story isn't entertainment, it's a warning. Because once you've heard the crying child of the bridge, some say he follows you home, and the sobbing never really stops. Chapter 20. The Ghost Ship at Sea. For centuries, sailors have told stories of ships that appear out of nowhere, phantoms drifting silently across the waves. But one legend, whispered among fishermen in the North Atlantic, is especially chilling: the ghost ship of the gray waters. It's described as an enormous vessel, its sails torn, its deck cloaked in mist. Some say it glows faintly in the moonlight, as if lit from within. Others insist it appears only in storms, rising from the waves like a drowned giant. Those who've seen it report the same detail: not a single sound. No creaking wood, no crashing waves, only silence. But on its deck, shadowy figures move, pacing endlessly, frozen in their last duty. Sailors swear they've seen crew members waving desperately, mouths open in silent screams. The origin of the legend ties back to a merchant ship lost in the 1700s. Struck by a sudden storm, it vanished without a trace. Its cargo and crew never recovered. Some believe the ship never sank at all, cursed instead to sail the oceans forever, never finding port. Modern fishermen still claim to see it. One trawler reported nearly colliding with a massive ship that vanished seconds before impact. Another crew found their compass spinning wildly as a fog rolled in, and when it cleared, the ghostly vessel was drifting beside them. They say if you spot the ghost ship, it's a bad omen, because not long after, a storm always follows. Chapter 21. The Face in the Window. There's a farmhouse in rural Kansas that no one dares to live in anymore. From the outside, it looks ordinary: weathered wood, a sagging porch, fields stretching out in every direction. But the windows tell a different story. For decades, neighbors have reported seeing a face staring out from the upstairs bedroom window. It doesn't matter if the house is locked, empty, or even boarded up. The face always returns. Witnesses describe it differently. Some see a young girl with hollow eyes. Others swear it's an old man with sunken cheeks. But all agree on one detail: the face never blinks. It simply stares as if waiting. The story traces back to the family who once owned the farmhouse. In the late 1800s, tragedy struck when a fire consumed the upstairs bedroom. A child perished inside, trapped by the flames. Her father, consumed by guilt, later took his own life in the same room. Since then, the window has remained haunted. Farmers passing by at night say they've locked eyes with the face, only to feel overwhelming dread, as if it wanted them to come closer. A few who entered the house claim they felt watched the entire time, and when they looked up, the face was there, pressed against the glass from inside. Today, the farmhouse sits abandoned, windows cracked and broken. But if you drive by after dark, locals dare you to glance up, because the face in the window just might be looking back. Chapter 22. The Endless Hallway. In an old hospital slated for demolition, construction workers stumbled on something strange: a hallway that didn't seem to end. From the outside, the building's layout looked ordinary, but once inside, the corridor stretched on far longer than the structure should have allowed. Workers reported walking for minutes without reaching the end. The lights flickered overhead, the tiles repeating in an endless loop. Some turned back only to find the exit had vanished, replaced with more hallway. One man swore he walked for hours, hearing faint footsteps behind him, but never seeing anyone there. When he finally emerged, his coworkers said he'd been gone less than 10 minutes. Another worker left chalk marks along the walls, only to return and find them erased, as if the building had swallowed them whole. Rumors spread that the hospital once used the wing for experiments on patients, keeping them in isolation for weeks. Some believe the endless hallway is a scar left behind, trapping the souls of those who suffered. Urban explorers who sneak inside claim the hallway is still there. Many bring cameras, but their footage always glitches, cutting out just as the corridor begins to stretch. A few explorers never came back at all. Their belongings later found abandoned at the entrance. The building is gone now, reduced to rubble. But locals whisper that sometimes, if you stand on the empty lot at night, you'll hear footsteps echoing, still searching for an end that doesn't exist. Chapter 23: The Devil's Crossroads. At the edge of a forgotten southern town lies a dirt road intersection locals call the Devil's Crossroads. From a distance, it looks like any other rural crossing, two dusty paths meeting under the shadow of ancient oak trees. But those who know the legend refuse to go near it after midnight. Stories say if you stand at the center of the crossroads at exactly 12 a.m. and whisper what you desire most, a figure will appear. Some describe him as a tall man in a black suit with glowing red eyes. Others say he takes the form of someone you trust, a loved one, a friend, or even yourself. He offers what you want: fame, wealth, power, or talent, in exchange for a single promise: your soul when your time runs out. Those who accept claim their lives change instantly. Musicians play like gods, poor men strike gold, and nobodies rise to stardom overnight. But every gift has its price. One man who struck the deal became a blues legend. He played as if the music came from somewhere beyond this world. But he died young, found collapsed in the very crossroads where he'd made his bargain. Even now, travelers report strange things when driving past. Radios cut to static, shadows shift unnaturally, and some swear they've seen someone standing in the middle of the road, waiting. Locals warn, the devil doesn't give, he trades. And at the crossroads, the only thing you're guaranteed to take home is regret. Chapter 24: The Whispers in the Cornfield. There's something unsettling about cornfields at night. The tall stalks sway with the wind, creating a rustling that can trick the ear into hearing voices. But in a small Midwestern town, people swear the whispers in the fields are not caused by the breeze. For generations, farmers have told the same story. If you walk into the cornfield after dark, the stalks begin to murmur your name. At first, it sounds like a trick of the mind, faint and distant. But the deeper you go, the louder the voices grow, until they surround you completely, repeating your secrets, your fears, and things no one should know. One farmer's son vanished after daring his friends to enter at midnight. The search lasted weeks. When his body was found, he was curled between the stalks, his face frozen in terror, his ears filled with soil as if he'd tried to block out the sound. Locals say the whispers belong to the lost, those who entered the cornfield and never returned. Their souls wander between the rows, desperate to lure new victims into the darkness. Some survivors claim they felt hands brushing their arms, tugging at their clothes, guiding them deeper. Even today, passers-by report hearing voices when driving by the fields at night. A soft chorus carried on the wind, calling out to anyone who will listen. If you ever find yourself near one of these fields after dusk and hear your name whispered, don't turn toward it. Keep walking. Chapter 25: The Black-Eyed Children. They appear at night, often near lonely roads, gas stations, or even outside suburban homes. At first glance, they look like ordinary children, pale, quiet, sometimes dressed strangely out of time. But when they lift their heads, you see it. Their eyes are solid black, endless pools of darkness with no whites, no pupils, nothing human at all. Encounters usually begin with a knock at the door or a tap on the car window. The children speak politely, but their words are oddly formal, almost rehearsed. They ask to come inside, to use the phone, to get a ride, to wait for their parents. But something about their tone feels wrong, robotic, cold. Witnesses describe being overwhelmed with dread, a primal instinct screaming that something is terribly off. And then the demand comes, let us in. If you hesitate, the children grow more insistent, their voices deeper, almost echoing. Those who refuse and slam the door, claim the children, simply vanish into thin air. But those who have given in are rarely heard from again. Legends say the black-eyed children are not human at all, but something ancient wearing a child's form. Some believe they're vampires. Others think they're demons. A few whisper their experiments gone wrong. Creations trying to blend into our world. The rule is simple. Never let them in, because once they cross your threshold, You may never see daylight again.